I was doing removal. And those are the people who show up to the hospital, to hospice, nursing homes, wherever it is. Crime scenes, doesn't matter. Removal are the people who show up to get a decedent from A to B, all the while being very professional and meeting the family. They're like the face. It's a weird process because it changes based on what hospital you go to. You would think you would have like, a practical or regulated system that every hospital would use, but a lot of them are different. And the first hospital I went to, a hospital called Sacred Heart, which where I lived in Florida is by far the biggest hospital that was there. The process for getting into Sacred Heart was basically to drive past the dumpsters, go over to the back part of the hospital, you would back in, and sometimes it was actually the morgue that we would pick up our decedent from was attached to the medical examiner's office. So they were the people who would pick up, drug overdoses, murder, homicide, whatever, whatever you want to call it. All the shit that makes it on TV, that's their job. So I met them, talked to them a bit, and the the person they pull out, I can smell them. This was a wild first case, man. It was definitely a trial by fire, because as I found out, as I was as I was backing in and getting all the gurneys out and stuff, he was like, hey, you're there to pick up 2 decedent, but you're only gonna need 1 gurney. Just go inside and you'll understand. And I was like, okay. So I go inside and they bring the first guy out. And the smell, it's not like decomp. It's not, like dead smell, whatever. It's burn. It's barbecue. And when I say that, that's not meant to be a joke. It really smelled like barbecue, like just good barbecue. And I say that because it's a very important thing to acknowledge. And so I opened the bag, and it was a dude completely just burned, just absolutely fried. And he's obviously, I can't because I'm in VR, but he's hobbled up with his elbows and hands up over his head. And so, and his knees are locked up and his hands are over his head, and he's kind of like in the fetal position almost, but as if he was sitting. And I find out that he died because he got stuck in the cabin of the box truck that he was driving when these 2 teenagers on the road in their pickup truck swerved into him and hit him head on. And so he got stuck in there and burned alive. That is the first person I picked up. The second was a baby. So that was why I would only need 1 gurney. So this is the very first solo trip I have ever made. And normally, when you go to the morgue, it's a super easy, you can show up in like a t-shirt and jeans. You don't really have to stress about it too much. It's usually the middle of the night, whatever. This one was middle of the day, and so I, showed up dressed to the nines just to make sure in case I came across a family or something. You never know. So I zipped the burned victim up after putting his name tag on, which, let me tell you, that was a fucking experience. Trying to pick up and move the leg of a burned victim and then put it's an identification band. It's by law, you have to have them. And put it on his ankle, and I can't, because every time I go to grab his leg, it just slips, and skin comes off in my hands, because it's charred and burnt. If they've lost the left leg, which every funeral home / company is different. You're allowed to place it in different locations. You just have to have one. But the one that we used was the left leg. If the left leg was gone or was a little stumpy stump, you would go to the right leg. And if that one was also a little stumpy stump, then you would move to the left arm, then the right arm. And then if you had no limbs to work with, you just did what you could. Whether it was just put it around the stump, have it in their bag with them. You could take a blank tag and the original tag, put them together to make a really big loop, and then put that up over their thigh. Something of that nature. Just anything to get it on them at that point. Eventually, I have to get my whole hand and palm underneath his leg, lift, and then put the band on over the top and pinch it closed. Because otherwise I would not have been able to get it on him. And yes, of course I'm wearing gloves, but it doesn't change the fact that because those gloves are so thin, you really do feel somebody's skin coming off in your hand. And it's just as awful as it sounds like. It's someone's skin in your hand, and you have no choice but to just take the glove off, shake your hands clean in the bag, and it's you know, that's what a messy death does. So that was the first day on removal I'd ever had solo. And so in, you know, one hand, I've got this baby. It's like the size of like a small Amazon delivery box, man. It's a cardboard, like a white cardboard box with a name tag on top, usually the mother or whatever immediate parent was there, and then the child, the name of the child, if they even had a name. And then on the other hand, I've got a gurney with a burn victim, and load both into the back of the van, do the necessary paperwork, which is a lot of paperwork, by the way, and drive back to the funeral home. Basically, the crematory is a separate building from the funeral home itself, and the crematory also houses the cooler at this particular funeral home. And so I open up the cooler, pull the gurneys into the crematory, get them all unloaded onto their lifts, and then slot them into their respective slots on the shelves in the cooler. And that's what a whole job would look like. That was the first day. Burn victim, baby. So it was definitely a good chance to find out if I could handle the worst parts of the job. I've worked a lot of jobs because I moved out when I was 18, working like food, doing pizza delivery, and then that moved into a call center, which then moved into sales, and then somehow I ended up in pest control. And then pest control is where I stayed for about a year, and then I had a client who I was talking with one day, and he was like, "Hey man, you see that guy over there washing his van? What do you think he does for a living? I see in the back that it's got these metal rolls, and he has 2 gurneys pulled out and set to the side, and he's washing it down, hosing it, spraying it with disinfectant." I'm like, "Oh, is he like some kind of, I don't know, like private medical practice or something?" No. He picks up dead people. And so we go over, we talk to him, he gives me his card, and he's like, "If you ever, you know, want a job change, maybe hit me up, we could talk about it." 3 months later, I do. The interview process, there really wasn't an interview. He and I talked on the phone a bit, but he really needed help. So it was basically do you have a felony? No? Fantastic, you're hired. He brought me to a family, to a hospital, brought me along, and was like, "Make sure that you can handle dead bodies." And I could. Much to my surprise, it didn't really bother me. Only one person in my life that I was like really, even kind of like remotely attached to had really died. And so I really wasn't all that familiar with death. And so my initial thought was like, I'm gonna fucking cry, or I'm gonna, I'm gonna freak out, or whatever. And then we got to the hospital, and we opened the body bag, and we, do what we have to do. Not a step of it bothered me. And I don't know if that's because maybe I'm like emotionally stunted, or if it's, I just got lucky. Everyone has their own dispositions with these things, and I guess I just never knew. But as it turns out, I'm pretty good with non-personal death. One of the days I was driving about, I had to drive an hour and a half to a place called Perdido Key to pick someone up, right? This job in particular, dude was just big old dude. We had like no space to maneuver. So we had to go out to the living room, pick up this dude's stuff that had been sitting there for who knows how long, move it out of the way, get everything, shifted around, and then try and find a way to move this dude onto the gurney, get him strapped in, pick up the gurney, lock the wheels in place, go to the other end of the gurney, pick that side up, lock it in place. Just nothing was in our favor. Dude's mattress is on the floor in the corner of the room, and it takes up basically the whole room. The only other space being taken up by him, the dead guy, and his dresser. So we pick up the mattress and slide it over up against the wall. Luckily, it didn't have a springboard or anything, it was just the mattress. And we throw a sheet down next to him. We roll him over, because luckily he's face down. And if he's face down, you need to get him on his back. So we didn't have to go through the trouble of rolling him onto his stomach and then back onto his back, because we didn't have room for it. We got lucky, basically. So we rolled him over on his back onto the sheet. And luckily I have a coworker here with me as well as the cops. And we all go to lift the sheet and pick this dude up, and you stop, and you're pulling, and you're pulling, and you're pulling, and you're just trying as hard as you can, and you start to get him off the ground just a little bit, and then bam, you let go. your fingers, crack, they slip, something that's just like, fuck, like, all right, gonna take a second. And so you start to think, it's problem solving. You're like, what can we do? We can't stay here forever. We have to get this dude on the gurney. I can't leave until this guy is moved. No matter what, I have to do this. And so instead, we come up with the idea of moving the gurney out into the super narrow hallway. And when I say narrow hallway, I mean just the gurney fits, and you have like 2 inches of clearance to the wall. And this dude is much wider than that. So we get him back on the sheet, exactly how he was, and then we drag him out of his room. And that goes a little easier because obviously dragging is easier than lifting. And we drag him out of his room, and then as soon as we get him right at the head of the gurney in the hallway, we tie the sheet off entirely, so he's all bundled up, and we just pick up only his head and his arms and get his torso up onto the gurney. And then someone goes to the legs, picks up the legs, someone just tears their back out, it was me in this case, and picks up, the torso and the head, shovels it, crab walking backwards, super slow, the longest 5 seconds of your life, and you get him on the gurney. So you strap him in, you go to pick him up, all the while dealing with his like 500-pound body, so it's taking you and someone else to really get the gurney up. Lock in all the wheels, you get him all the way up, and it's like, yeah! You start wheeling him out, and you've made a path. And you get halfway through that path, and the gurney collapses. So now, you're kind of having an oh shit moment, because you're left to wonder, did the gurney collapse under weight and is still usable, or did the gurney collapse and break? Luckily, it just collapsed. We get him back up. We somehow get him out to the van, wheel him in, get back to the funeral home where things are much easier to do. And you go to pull him out of the back of the van. You pull him over onto the lift, you shove him into the cooler, and you made a grand total of $25. That's one of the worst physical jobs I had. But talking with coworkers, they would have much preferred the physical job that I struggled with rather than the emotional jobs. And the emotional jobs, of course, being you get there, it's a hospice situation, there's 12 family members, and everyone is just destroyed. Nothing you say or do can make that better. Unlike being a friend or a family member, you're a stranger. And not only are you a stranger, you are now the face of the person who has come to take their loved one in passing. You are quite literally the Grim Reaper. When you show up, it becomes final for a lot of people. They realize, holy shit, my mom is gone, or holy shit, my son's dead. These people are here to take him away from me. With removal, the worst case I have ever had, and I shouldn't laugh, that's fucked up, but you kind of lose a little bit of those inhibitions when it comes to death and making, jokes and finding humor in situations that obviously are not humorous. And this guy had been... So he lived on a residential street with a bunch of other houses. And after like a week and a half, people started to call the emergency services. They're like, hey, my neighbor hasn't been outside in like 2 weeks. And it smells horrible. I think he's dead. And he was. So we show up with the cops, and the cops there, as we're pulling up and we get out, the cops they see us, they nod, and then when I get close, he stops, plants his feet, turns and looks at me, and he's like, you're gonna hate this. And I'm sorry. Not the first words you want to hear at 3 a.m. on a hot summer night and you've been woken out of a dead sleep. You're hoping it's easy, and instead you open the door, or at least you try to open the door. You instead put your shoulder to it and find out that there's boxes and shit in the way, so another hoarder situation. You clear a little bit of a path, you give up because there's so much, and you're just like, alright, I can smell this guy. Let me go find him first and figure out where what I need to do from there. And the whole way you're stepping through all this shit, man. I mean, your arms are up, you're looking to your sides, making sure you're not hitting anything. It's, you're trying to cut lights on. and you're stepping over stuff and you're hearing shit squelch and squish and crunch under your feet, so you're looking up and trying not to think about what you're stepping on, and then you get to the dude's bedroom and you just see him there in all his glory. Gray, slimy, wet, decomp skin, maggots crawling out of his eyeballs, mouth wide open, flies buzzing around. There's like, 5 or 10 dive bombing you constantly. You're just brushing your hands out of the way. And you've gotta get him. You gotta grab this guy. And I'm like, fuck, man, what do I do? And I mean, normally you apply some critical thinking skills and you figure out a good solution. But this time around, man, I was stumped. I had no ideas. I didn't know what I could do. The cops didn't want to come inside, understandably so. I had to go back to my van and get my gas mask. It was so bad. I was genuinely afraid that I was going to contract something. And so eventually I just get in there and I start clearing all this trash out. And because he's so decomped, I know that I have to get this dude onto a gurney ASAP, because I can't drag him. Because whatever I grab onto will just come right off. Muscle, sinew, skin, whatever it is, it's not gonna stay. Luckily, he's laying on some cardboard. And so I pull on the cardboard and it snaps. It rips in half because it's soaked through with his bodily fluids. So I throw that to the side, give up on that idea. And then I force one of the cops to come in, and I was like, look, dude, just pick up that end and set him on this gurney so I can get out of here. And as we're going to pick him up, the cop's hands slip because the dude leaked out because he's decomping. And he's been in here for more than 2 weeks. And I mean, when I say like maggots, and I mean like just the worst decomp case I have ever seen. So he drops him and I'm holding the head end and I'm trying really hard to keep holding him. I mean, just every ounce of my being. Cop picks the feet back up, we get him on the gurney, lift up the gurney, lock him in, we pick up both ends of the gurney, and we're crab walking, going backwards with the gurney, all the way back over all the trash. We almost get him in the van, and the fucking gurney capsizes. Not straight down to the ground, so it's an easy transfer job, onto its fucking side, sending the dude out into the middle of the street. And at that point, I'm genuinely ready to cry. I mean, the job was bad enough I had to go and put a gas mask on, right? And the entire time I'm trying really hard to remain, dignified. Remember, this is a person, this is a person, this is a person, this is a person. But in that moment, man, I just wanted to leave. I was like, all I want to do now is just pack up the shit, throw it in the van, drive it back to my employer, and go home and never look back. Obviously, I don't do that, but oh my god, it was so tempting. He is literally just splayed out on the ground. I'm so fed up at this point that I bend down and I put on an extra pair of gloves and I bear hug him. Awful as it sounds. Dude's on my chest, I can feel it on my clothes, and I just pick him up and I drop him back on the gurney, pull his legs back up and over, lock him in. The cop helps me pick the gurney up, put it in the van, and I go to the funeral home. And then I immediately go home, I take a shower, a really, really, really hot shower, brush my teeth, floss. You get a little desensitized, because despite how awful that job was, despite the fact that I had to wear, a gas mask, I was still able about an hour or 2 hours afterwards, after cleaning up, to just go eat. And that is the worst removal job I had ever had. It taught me a little bit about my own patience and what I'm willing to do for myself and my own pride. Because not leaving that guy there, it's a matter of dignity and respect, but it's also, I had an out. I could have fucked off and told the cops, hey, you're gonna have to call the fire department or do this, because in a way you reserve the right to do that. As a third-party employee in that situation, you can technically bail out if you believe a job is too difficult for you by yourself to accomplish, And you can, in theory, make it someone else's problem. And so despite how awful the situation was, I managed to get through it, which was really, was a nice, good experience for me, but also, like, I don't ever want to do anything like that again. I found myself some days, I'd unzip a body bag and go to put clothes on someone, I'd see them dressed, and sometimes I'd just look at them. That's gonna be me. At some point, you and I will be no different. I didn't mean you specifically, but like...
I'm never gonna die. If you could tell everybody in the world one thing, what would it be?
I guess I would just want people to stop for a day and just kind of take stock of themselves. Just do nothing. Just sit alone, think about who you are, don't get on your computer, don't get on your phone. Just take a day, figure you out. If there's anything that I've taken from experiencing literally daily death, is that we're not unique in a lot of the ways that we think we're unique. The only thing that makes us unique is the things that we can't really convey, the things that we can't really tell people, things that only you yourself can know. So figure out what that is if you can. And if you can't, keep trying. Eventually you'll get there, or maybe you won't and you'll die. Who knows?